Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com. Of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by Lucan Studios creative team, Van Vian van Bergen, whose work includes the feature film Izura, work on game trailers such as Terra Nil, and Moremi, an episode for Disney's Kizazimoto, Generation Fire for Disney Plus, just to name a few things. Welcome to the show.
It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question is, because Lucan Studios, that's something you created. So how did you go about, like, what inspired you to create Lucan? What is sort of your goal as a company?
That's like the origin story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So we started Lucan about 10 years ago. It was really, out of the classic garage story. We started, my current business partner and I, Werner, we started with projection mapping. But as a side hustle, we all still had our day jobs.
Mhm.
And we did these projections where we projected on cars or buildings, and that slowly started to pick up, and we became more busy, and like we actually got clients, and we had to like take off from work, go to the dentist, and then we had these fake meetings set up, and the projects really started picking up until one day we just decided, we can't do both, and then we just decided to take a risk and start the business. Obviously, we were still young, so it didn't really
Yeah.
matter if it failed or not. But yeah, that's where we started. Things we slowly grew from there. We started hiring people. We started pivoting away from the projection mapping and the show and event space, doing more commercial work. Later, we also started pivoting more away from that into more like things like Moremi, short films, feature films, brand films, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's quite humbling to know, like 10 years later, we've worked with clients like Disney, and some of the projects been nominated for Annie Awards. So it's been such an incredible journey so far.
So when I was researching your background on the website, it says that you rebel against average. Can you expand on that? Like what is average for you guys that you're rebelling against?
It's just such a swear word. If someone says your work's average or good, this feels so like, everyone puts so much time and love and energy into all the projects we do. And if you get feedback that something is average, it's such a gut punch. So I think that's kind of where it comes from. We really try to craft everything we can. And I know that that's such a trope, but it's true. People, especially artists, like we really try and make it the best we can, spend that extra hours, and hopefully it succeeds. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's just really not trying not to produce work that is average.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art. To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them. I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
So now I want to jump to Mormi. What's interesting to me is it's based on a Nigerian myth, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so when I look at, because it's produced by Disney, so when I look at Disney's early run, when they first started, a lot of it was sort of taking on those Scandinavian fairy tales and creating sort of a larger format for it as opposed to just a couple of pages. So I'm wondering, did you guys look at how they did that transition from story to film for when you guys took on this myth, or like how did you guys approach it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the story is originally from the director. He co-wrote it with someone else. I forget the name now, and I apologize for that. But he's from Nigeria, and obviously that's where the inspiration comes
Mm.
from. It's a Nigerian fable. So he not all the shows in the anthology are like these retelling of fables. Moremi is quite unique in that way. So
Mhm.
that is specifically where it came from his experience as a child, and you know, the longing to home. He currently lives in America, and I think it's that longing to home that inspired him to tell the story of Moremi.
Oh, interesting. But like in your, like, I'm wondering from inspiration point of view, what did you guys turn to for inspiration for creating the look of this?
Yeah, man, that was quite a, you know, obviously we wanted to stay true to, you know, the roots of the story and the culture, you know, specifically because it's the people working on the film is from all over the world. We're based in South Africa, of course. You know, a few of us have been to Nigeria a few times. So, you know, we did so much research in the beginning in pre-production phase. It's just like reading through a lot of stuff, you know, finding image references, you know, just making sure that everything is quite accurate to what we want to, the story we want to tell. We did a recce to Nigeria, Shofela Koker, the director. He brought back a bunch of amazing like photography, architecture, you know, the natural landscape, Yoruba printmaking. So all of those things together formed this tapestry of inspiration that we drew from. And you know, the great thing about Moremi was it wasn't, you know, where we started with the director's pitch deck and where it ended was such two different worlds. So it was quite an organic process as we went through at least the design phase of things.
Well, what's cool is like you sort of mentioned it really fast that you did the Yoruba printmaking, like you used that as inspiration, but it's like the background in some of the shots, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that obvious, but like what a lot of the backgrounds we incorporated in, for example, on the rocks, it's like as a texture, some patterns, or even like in the silhouette of the trees, you can see some of the leaves are small little patterns. We even went as far as to when we did the lighting for the characters, we can talk about the process of the compositing phase, but in the penumbra of the light, how we broke that penumbra up was with some patterns. So you won't see it, but if you know about it, then you can probably see it.
Now, one of the things that's interesting is I've looked at all your guys' work on your website and through various, you know, Disney Plus and what have you. And what I found interesting is you you have so many different animation styles that you sort of jump into. Is there a particular one that you prefer or the one that is your favorite that you work on?
We don't, I wouldn't say we've got a specific style. We embrace artistic diversity. We collaborate with quite a few different artists over the years, and it really depends on the projects and the need of the project. That's not to say that certain briefs, you know, excite us more than others.
Yeah.
You know, so speaking as an artist, you know, my personal style also went through a lot of seasons. You know, I started off loving, you know, those very clean and crisp motion graphic stuff when I was younger, and now I love stuff that's way more expressive, and you know what they've done with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and that kind of stuff. So, you know, I think as a studio we do the same. You know, we go through different seasons of styles. I think we're currently in this more like 2D, 3D hybrid exploration and seeing how we can push that.
Well, I was thinking like your style in particular because you're also an artist outside of animation. So I was wondering, is there animation that inspires you, whether it be creatively in the animation room or when you're doing your artwork outside?
Yeah, I do a bit of oil painting and particularly love charcoal work. So that's definitely something that I do to unwind, to get some time away from the screen. Actually, it's funny, during Moremi, I was supposed to be on a 3-month sabbatical in Mexico, you know, doing oil painting, learning from someone I met in Italy a few years ago. But then Moremi came along and I just couldn't pass that up. So I was doing like the oil painting training plus Moremi in the mornings. It was just like such a crazy time. But it was so great to be able to, because I think a lot of that oil painting stuff that I've learned was applied in Moremi and like how we treated certain textures and stuff. So I think it's interesting how these things influence one another. But I would say Moremi specifically, you know, a lot of inspiration was drawn from, you know, master painters. You know, I guess contemporary people would be like Richard Schmidt. Like his work is absolutely incredible, and like the old masters like Soroya, you know, Edgar Payne. Like there's so many like things from all of these masters that we just kind of like stole. But you know, it's foundational. You know, so that's, I think a lot of it was based on that.
So, you know, you're working in Mexico. on a film and doing your course at the same time. So like that might be the answer to my question is the most difficult part, but like what would you say was like a scene or a moment that was pretty difficult for you guys to sort of achieve the look or the feel?
Yeah, I think that's more the thing. It was like achieving the look, was quite a challenge, because I think the biggest challenge was marrying the 2D backgrounds with the 3D characters and making sure it didn't feel like, CG stuck onto 2D paintings, So we really spend a lot of time and energy in developing a very custom workflow to be able to do that. And a lot of the magic happened in compositing. So that was definitely one of the challenges. But like you rightfully said, I mean, I was in Mexico kind of on my own, like and it was a different time zone. So, you miss your team and your crew, but I think once you get used to the time zone difference, things gets a little bit easier. I don't know how the director Shof did it. He was in the States at the time, so he was always kind of on his own. At least when you're in the studio, you're in the hustle and bustle, and there's people around you, and you can bounce ideas around. So yeah, I think those two things were probably the most challenging parts for me.
Now you've mentioned the compositing a couple times, so I don't know because it might be proprietary to you guys and you don't want to talk about it, but is there something you could tell us about the process or the compositing that helped you make it more merge those two seamless, 2D and 3D
Yeah,
elements?
yeah. So traditionally, how one would work is, when you render your image, like with V-Ray, for example, the computer does all the calculations. So it figures out, what is the material, what is the reflection, like, is it bumpy, is it not, like all these things, and it spits out like your image. And then I guess in simple terms from there, do a few tweaks if you need to, but then that's pretty close to your final result. So what we've done with Moremi is we didn't really use the final image in that state at all. We then separated all of those separate elements into different layers. So for example, what is the influence of that specific light? That is just one image, and we can use that as a mask. What is the influence of just the base color? And then we can like overlay that with certain textures and patterns. So then in compositing, we then bring all of that stuff together, but then we manipulate it in such a way that it gets quite a painterly aesthetic, but it doesn't have that CG, perfect aesthetic where, things are like really smooth or, very like perfectly lit. We can really manipulate it and make it feel like it's a bit of more of a hand painted feel. And then also making sure that the backgrounds, we've got a lot of control with matching it to the backgrounds in that case as well.
Very interesting. Now, I do want to ask you, we talked a bit about the AI question. So I do want to ask you, so uh, and if I mess this up in asking, I apologize. But I think back about Carl Banks, who did the Donald Duck comics back in the 40s and 50s, and I think about how that it goes on to influence um, Osamu Tezuka, sorry, um, to create things like Astro Boy and what have you, and create sort of manga. And what's interesting about that is Carl Banks draws one way, someone gets inspired with it. They don't have the same style, so they sort of take the inspiration and they create something new, but being inspired. When I think about AI, a lot of people are putting in when they ask for something, I want it to be exactly like this, anime or this particular movie. Here's the lighting I want. And it's just going to sort of go back and look at what it has and then generate something based on that. We're not sort of, I don't want to say creating something new, but I'm wondering where the creative line is in AI. Like, how do you guys see using it as a creative tool so that we're not just remixing or recreating sort of what we've done before, but taking it and being inspired with it?
Oh, touching on a sensitive topic. It's a really a good question, and such an interesting question. And I mean, I've been, listening to a lot of people speak to this. Also as a studio, you also have some fears about, what is AI and what's it going to mean for the industry. I'm sure a lot of artists have the same fears. So, speaking from that place, I think you mentioned a few words that I definitely think is worth mentioning again is influence. So, I think what AI sometimes happen with AI, it's not really influence. It's almost like stealing. It's sometimes stealing something almost pixel for pixel. Whereas when an artist is influenced by something, you also project your flaws and your styles and your experience with that influence. So it becomes something new. So I think it's almost two different ways of creating stuff. And then the second thing that you mentioned was a tool. So I think that's quite important. So I don't think one should fight AI or stop AI or anything like that. I think you should embrace it as a tool. There are definite ways of using it in production that's creative, that can make production better, ideation. I just think that personally, I just feel when you start stealing stuff from artists like verbatim, that's where things get tricky. Yeah, I think that's where the line is a little bit blurred at this stage.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
How do you see it becoming a tool for you guys? Like, is there, because like I've seen it, in After Effects, it's like I need to extend the scene and I'm just gonna draw, have it extend it using AI. But as an animator, is there things like that you see coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, so interesting that we're currently working on a project at the moment where we're using AI. So with a specific client, we're working, it's quite a corporate client. So the character cast, so first of all, the aesthetic of the show is quite realistic. So the characters should look pretty real. We're doing the characters in 3D, but we need to go through like a whole casting phase with the agency. And instead of getting someone into concept art, all of these characters individually, we used AI, but generated real humans, as in photography humans. So then we sent them like a whole cast of what this character profile could be, whatever it is. And then once they narrow that down for us, we used, for example, the 3D ones that they like the most. Then we go into concepting phase where we turn that into like the painterly style of characters that we require. So it did save us a lot of time and back and forthing and just wasting resources. So I think that kind of leapfrogged us a little bit. Still, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how we've used it as a tool on this current project.
Yeah, like I've had directors send me like, here's what I want it to look like, but not like this. Like it's sort of like they quickly created something in AI so that they could sort of get like as a communication tool in a sense, because they don't know how to communicate with the creative the way.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a little easier because it's like, oh, I get that style. I know what you're talking about. Let me go do something with that.
What's interesting, Gordon, it's like same thing, but sometimes it happens where the directors sometimes generate this image and then that gets shared with a lot of people, and then that's the image that people expect. So then they kind of lock out any creative inputs, and then that is now the image that everyone expects the studio or the artist to make. So I think that can backfire in some instances. But I mean, if it is a tool and people are open-minded in helping ideation phase, I think that's also quite interesting, But we've been in a situation where, the clients send us these AI images and, this is what they want us to create, a similar style. Now that is almost like the North Star, or becomes the North Star, and we kind of lock into that, which, sucks a little bit if you want to be creative.
Yeah, I think I was lucky with that director because he was just like, here's a stack of different inspiration, go nuts.
Yeah.
So, but I've had, like you said, I've had people who fall in love with it and it's temp love and what have you. Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Guilty pleasure. I mean, I really love what the folks have done with Arcane. I actually went through a phase where I literally paused on some of the frames and just like study it, because every frame is like a
crazy.
painting. Like the composition, the cinematography, the colors, the lighting, everything is just perfect. So hats off to those guys. Everyone, I know it's a ginormous team, but just like everything there is just perfect. So I think that for me is something that I can watch and rewatch.
It's amazing. They're really
Worth mentioning, the second one, I'm sure you can also, or I'm sure you've seen some of his work, is Alberto Mielgo's The Witness. Was part of Love, Death, Robots. That
Yeah.
film, you know, you can study those images and just like be amazed of the raw talent. And I mean, also a lot of people worked on it, but just it's such incredible work. So those two films, or those two projects are the ones that definitely stands out for me.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Yeah, of course. It was lovely speaking with you, and thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.